go get it. Hello.
All right, just as Jenny gets up here. So welcome everyone that's joining us live on Facebook. I'm really excited for our next conversation with two probably the most experienced horse people I know. I don't know what to say. You guys have so much experience and that I'm excited to do this conversation. So we're excited tonight to have Tony and Jenny Vaught, who many around the horse community know. And so we're excited to hear from you guys this evening. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. You know, I think we just have more experience because we're so old.
No, I don't think that. So I thought we'd start, because I don't actually know this, how both of you got into horses. So I thought I'd start by asking you to introduce yourselves a little bit, but take me back to the very beginning about how horses came into your lives. So Tony, we'll start with you.
Well, basically, my mom and dad got me a pony when I was 9. And that's how it got started.
So it just grew from there?
Yeah, you know, my dad, he would bring horses home. He brought home 2 or 3 ponies for me to start, get going. And you know, Dad was just a trail rider and pretty laid back and didn't have a lot of horse savvy. So, you know, it was hard to say what he would unload out of the trailer at our place. And so I just kind of learned how to stay on in the beginning, you know, fortunately for me, you know, that worked out okay. And then, you know, as time went on, I really liked horses. But my horse career probably didn't really take off until I got really interested in competition goals. And at that point, I started to knuckle down and really try to understand what I could do better and, you know, try to sort my way through my own issues to help my horses get better.
Okay. How about you, Jenny? How did you get started?
Well, my parents always kidded about the first word I said when I was a baby was horse. I just have always loved horses. So I pestered and bugged them until finally I started taking riding lessons when I was 8. And I just never stopped. So I actually started off riding saddlebreds and Arabs and Morgans, and then started teaching and training when I was 14, and just kept going from there. I competed pretty much right from the start. I mean, once I learned how to ride.
Okay. So did both of you always know you wanted it to be your living, your career?
I did. I mean, that's what I always dreamed of. I did, you know, have a couple real jobs, short term, but since I was able to start, you know, I was able to start making money when I was 14 with horses. So, you know, I just did some other stuff through the winters sometimes, but I'm really only maybe a couple times really considered doing anything else. I don't know about you.
I couldn't make any money with horses when I was 14. But that's how I was still learning how to stay on. Yeah, so I've had several jobs. I've worked construction, and driven a truck some, and I've done several different things. You know, I probably I had some part-time jobs starting colts, and then I got into shoeing, and you know, probably didn't really go full-time like training until actually I met Jenny through a shoeing gig at her show barn, and kind of started seeing at that point she'd gone like, you know, natural. She had strayed away from traditional training methods, and I got really interested in that. And I'd already had some experience previous to that with a student, Ray Hunt's. You know, it's been almost 40 years ago when I watched him. You know, the guy came to town claiming that he could teach you how to start colts, that you wouldn't have to have a bridle or a halter on them, you know, first ride. So like my ears perked up and I went to that. But it was several years after that before I was actually able to really make a living riding horses. And that was, you know, after I met Jenny.
He would spy on me when he would come out to stew. try to figure out what crazy things we were doing.
Well, it sounds like you guys ended up having a great partnership throughout this. So one of the things that has always sort of impressed me about you guys is the people you've worked with throughout the years, that you've had the opportunity as horsemen to work with. And so I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about these incredible people that you've learned from throughout your career, and how that really has shaped what you guys do today with horses.
You want to start?
Well, we could probably have a couple of different categories there. We could have the guys that influenced us by giving us things that we could use, and we could also have on that list some people that gave us things that we know we wouldn't want to use. You know, both actually are you know, equally important, I think. We won't name any names or anything like that, but you know, the guys that influenced us the most, or influenced me the most in a positive way, would definitely, you know, Pat and Linda Pirelli would have to be there at the top, like just the top. Like I said, I went to a student of Ray Hunt back when Ray Hunt was still alive. I went to a Cold Start Clinic, and I can't even remember the guy's name. So, you know, Ray Hunt was probably my first like real influencer, someone that really started to make me think about how I was doing and give me things that I could, you know, make work. But after Ray Hunt and Pat and Linda, you know, you could certainly put up there Jack Brainerd. Jack Brainerd was a help. And
yeah, he was a lot of fun to ride with.
yeah. We rode with Leon Harrell. But I guess maybe from the cow horse standpoint, probably Jay and Gina Henson, like they had a tremendous amount of influence. So when I wanted to do ranch horse, when I really wanted to start learning how to do ranch horse, it was at a time when we worked for Len and Waylon. Oh shoot. Burger, right. And so like, as I really wanted to understand the ins and outs of ranch horse, well, I was also riding gaited horses because they didn't have any quarter horses. So not to say that I was handicapped, but I had to think about things a little differently, you know, to make it work for the gaited horse, let the gaited horses get a hold of, you know, the things that I wanted to do and give them a chance to get their footwork right so they could do it faster. So, you know, Jay and Gina were like they were right up there. Now those guys, you know, very traditional trainers. So, you know, we would take what they would teach us, and then we'd take our natural background and try to present things to our horses in a way that we thought would make the most sense to them. And that was a pretty fun time. I loved going out there and riding with those guys. I loved it. You know, and after that, gosh, I don't really know.
Well, we rode with Doug Jordan.
Oh, that's right, Doug Jordan.
He was also, you know, super knowledgeable and a lot of fun to ride with, and a great instructor too. You know, some guys are just easier to learn from than others. And Jay was another one, Jay and Gina, that were super easy to learn from.
Well, and Doug Jordan's got some credentials too. Like, you know, Jay and Gina Henson, they have great reputation in the rein cow horse business, AQHA rein cow horse. Like, and Doug Jordan, of course, he's a Hall of Fame cutting horse rider. So he's won like the Triple Crown, and he always showed his horses in a snaffle bit too. Like that was his big thing. You know, of course, he was a student of Ray Hunt, but he was very, very successful with his techniques.
So taking all those experiences from the people you've had to ride with, how would you describe your horse philosophy then with training?
She asks all the hard questions, doesn't she?
I mean, you talked about natural
horsemanship
several
We
times.
forgot to mention one guy, Ronnie Willis. Ronnie Willis was a mentor of Pat's. I mean, a supreme colt starter and difficult horse handler. He ran in Tom Dorrance and Bill Dorrance's crowd like he knew him personally. Guy was a fabulous hand. We don't want to not mention him.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just
No, No, that's great. It's just you've ridden with such incredible people, and I'm just kind of interested how that's all gone in and shaped what your philosophy with training is now. I mean, Tony, you mentioned several times the natural horsemanship side of things, but also getting into this competition stuff. So how all that meshes together.
Well, you kind of run through different phases. Like you're trying to, and it all depends on where you're coming from. So as I was learning how to apply these techniques, like I didn't come from a finesse side of the arena. Like my stuff was timed event. Totally the opposite of Jenny. Jenny, I was very fortunate that Jenny was really good at finesse. Although I have to warn you, anybody out there, spouses, you just don't ever offer advice until it's asked for. When it's asked for, it'll be well received most of the time.
Probably.
But you wait for the invitation. But you just start learning. For one thing, if your goal is to win, then you have to be able to execute. But as you go along and as you grow and you start to understand, and this is something that we learned through the ranch horse, was the eye appeal aspect. So like now you want eye appeal. Well, you can't have eye appeal with an unhappy horse. You can get functional, you can get mechanical motion, but you can't get that little that really makes your horse stand out. And even if your horse isn't a standout horse, you still want your horse, to present that look. There's just a different way of how they go. And when you start looking for that, well, then you start going back and you start looking at the things that you're doing. You say, all right, so like, what did I do that was too much yesterday? Like, when did I get to that point where I felt like my horse just wasn't, he was starting to check out on me, and so when you start to understand that you need to quit before you check out, that's where the natural horsemanship stuff really plays, because it's not about, how well you're thinking about how well your horse did today versus yesterday. But what you're really looking for is, and Jenny and I, like, we're both 100% on this, is, if your horse can just do a couple, 3 things, 0.5% to 1% better every time you go in or every time you leave the arena, like that's something you can build on. And that's kind of where I think we both ended up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if I can add one thing, a lot of times what we spend time on is just getting our foundation excellent. It's not all necessarily all the big fancy things. We probably spend less time on that. Well, we definitely spend less time on doing these things that look real fancy and cool. We spend most of our time making sure our foundation is super solid and excellent.
Yeah, and that definitely ties back to if you understand how important, and this term gets thrown about, it gets thrown around a lot, your relationship with your horse. It's like, you're a horse hugger, Tony. That's what I got called, in the beginning when I first started getting a hold of these concepts. Everybody call it, but if you're looking to build on that, well, now you're building a reliable individual. You're putting together a horse that you can depend on day after day after day, because you didn't make him feel bad about what he did wrong and you didn't overdo it. And there's a lot of guys out there that get that, I think, but I think when you implement your strategies with your foundation coming from people like Pat and Linda and Ronnie Willis and Ray Hunt and Doug Jordan and all those guys, like, it becomes a lot more important, like, because you want your horse connected to the job. That's what you want him involved.
Okay. So you talked a lot about stock horse stuff, and Tony, you mentioned a little bit getting into the ranch horse, and at the time you had gaited horses. So tell me how gaited horses came into your picture a little bit.
Well, you know what? I was actually forced into it. Literally, because Waylon wanted
Well,
to do
now
ranch
wait,
horse.
wait just a minute. Lynn and Waylon, well, it was Waylon that wanted to do ranch horses, but that is not how we got dragged into gated horses.
Well, from the ranch horse standpoint.
From,
Well,
but
that maybe we might have had one or two before that.
we had more than that. I actually have
Well,
my
we do have
background, I started riding gated horses way before Tony did. The very first horse that I rode for someone else was a walking horse that I, got paid to ride, was a walking horse. So I did have a background with other gated horses, but foxtrotters came about through Susan Engel. And she, at first was just interested in getting her horses started and riding. And she was involved in the natural horsemanship, but then she wanted to compete as well. And I think she went the first few times on her own. And then finally, between her and I think at that time, maybe Hope had brought a horse up to us. So we had somebody else and they wanted to compete. And so we finally were like, oh, okay, I guess we have to go compete. And then Lynn and Waylon wanted ranch horses, but they wanted to do it with their foxtrotters. So we had about, 2 to 3 people there kind of pulling us that direction.
Well, I'm glad they did that. Because I think we've all benefited from that. So having that experience of all these different breeds, what do you wish gated horse people knew about horsemanship or their horses that sometimes you don't see in all these clinics that you do and people bring you horses?
Well, one thing before we answer that, one thing I do want to add, I think one thing that benefited us, and we were so fortunate that Waylon was wanting to make ranch horses out of his foxtrotters, is because we had to slow things down a little bit and allow the horses a little more time to get their feet organized and to figure out their job. It actually caused us to train our other breeds of horses much better, because the same thing we needed to do for the foxtrotters, we really needed to do for every other breed we rode. But you could just kind of rush them a little bit more and they didn't get as tangled up most of the time. But it doesn't mean that's what we should have been doing. So I just have to add that in, that I felt like that was something that was a real advantage to us when we figured out how to go about it with the different breed of horse. Now, what was your question again?
Yeah.
My question is, so you guys do all these great clinics and I've seen your clinics and they're amazing. And one of the things that's really unique about you guys is, again, you have a very diverse group of horse breeds that normally come. And so I'm kind of interested in, for most of the people watching probably have gated horses. So in doing that, if you've seen something that you're like, man, I wish gated horse people knew this about their horse or knew this about horsemanship through those experiences of doing those clinics.
Well, it would be hard to be specific, I think, about gated horses there, because I think Jenny would agree with me on this. Most people do things too fast, or there's not enough settle time in between. Like, humans, they just don't think right sometimes about horses.
Well, every instinct we have is the exact opposite for a horse. What we will instinctively want to do usually is the exact opposite of what the horse needs us to do. But I think one of the things I would say, and it's not necessarily something that I wish people knew, but I think a lot of times people think they need to ride or train their gated horses differently than other breeds. And really the same foundation, all the things that are important with our quarter horses or paints or Arabs are exactly the same with the gated horses. There really is not a lot of difference there. I mean, obviously when you get to the gaits themselves, yes, there's going to be a few differences, but still, the more relaxed and connected your horse is, the better they're going to perform, whether it be, a big English trot or a fox trot or, chasing a cow down the fence.
So when you get a horse in for training, from what I take from that is every horse basically gets the same foundation on them, regardless of breed.
Yes,
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
that is correct.
Well, when we get one in our barn, it's like, no matter, the way I look at it, no matter what they're actually going to do, I'm putting together a ranch horse. I'm putting together something that an individual that's going to be very reliable, responsive, but confident, like, you know, a stand-up individual that when you unload out of the trailer, you know what you have. And so like that.
Very emotionally and physically fit, and then the physical and the conditioning, which we haven't really talked about, is equally important. It's not something that we necessarily have to spend a lot of extra time on, but it's something that we're always aware of. And although one thing I will add also, if your horse is emotionally fit, not extremely nervous, or you're not putting too much pressure on them, your chance of injury is reduced drastically. Usually horses get hurt if they're stressed physically or mentally.
So I had a couple people ask me to ask you a couple of questions about versatility, since you guys do some of that. And again, speaking a lot from the Foxtrot world, although I'm sure it carries over to other things. So one of the questions that I was asked is, what do you look for in a prospect? So you want to get a horse that will do versatility. What are the types of things that you would suggest people look for?
Well, that's a good one. If are we going to kind of include the ranch horse with the versatility?
Yeah, you can do both of those. I do have
Well,
some big ranch horse questions for you, Tony, so don't worry.
All right.
We like a horse with a fairly high play drive. We like a horse that, you know, if you watch them out with others, they're the ones, you know, kind of causing trouble, instigating things, you know, maybe pushing the other horses around. Not necessarily a super dominant horse, although that's okay. But we like them to have a good play drive. What do you want to add to that?
Well, so this would be like specific to me.
Okay.
I prefer one that has a little bit of lope and not a lot of foxtrot. Yeah, you know, it's easier for me. Well, I've got two things going on there. Like when I show my horses, like, I'm not that concerned about what the judge thinks of my horse. I just want him to go in there and work nice, and I want to be happy with what I've got going on. So like, I don't get a big kick out of that big head nod. I mean, I know gaited horses, that's where they go, and I'm totally fine with that, but I want my horse to be relaxed and look like he could go all day long doing what he's doing. So for me, like, you know, that if they're 3 or 4 ticks off of a performance horse, like, that makes me very happy, because most likely the lope's going to be better anyway. You know, that, and I definitely, I'd rather have to work, you know, for what I like to do the best, you know, in the rail class, like, the odds are like extremely high that, you know, maybe third would be the best I get. Because I just can't compete with those other horses. But they're going to have to come up, and they're going to have to catch me in the other classes usually.
Now the girls and I, you know, that's not necessarily what we're
Right,
looking
that's just
for.
me. You know.
Yeah, we want a little fancier going horse too.
Okay.
But basically, you need a horse. If I were gonna choose, you know, if I were going out and picking one, I prefer a horse that is not overly sensitive. You know, I don't want them super dull, but not overly sensitive. And I would prefer one that's not overly reactive. You know, the one we call, you know, uses more of their left brain. But a horse that's a little more confident. It just makes life easier.
Yep. A lot easier.
Easier in the show ring, and with the versatility horse, because there are so many different things you have to do, so many different patterns. And you know, when you have the horses that are a little more on the reactive side, and some of the classes like the trail classes, that split second where they may kind of have to go, ooh, I don't know, at an obstacle, can be the difference between you placing or not placing in the class. So, what takes maybe just a few seconds at home to work out, in the show ring, that seems like an eternity.
So you mentioned all the things a versatility horse has to do, and that was actually a question I had of, we talk about a world grand champion versatility horse or world grand champion ranch horse, and they're really sort of overall high point
Yes.
words. And so there's a question about what does that mean, and what are the classes you have to prepare for versatility or ranch horse?
Okay. Well, it's pretty fun, I think, because you have to have a super well-rounded horse. Your horse obviously does not have to be the best at everything, but they have to be able to place pretty high in most of their classes if you have a chance for the overall. So they have to go in and look like a fancy show horse in some of the classes, in the Western and the English classes. They also have to be able to maneuver through a trail pattern. So obstacles, obviously you have to be able to side pass and back and do nice pivots and go over and around different obstacles. You get to throw in some speed events. So, everybody gets to have a little fun on a barrel pattern and a pole pattern. And oh my gosh, I just went blank on the other one, but you get the gist. You got to be able to go fast and turn quick, which once again, well, we'll go ahead and throw the reining pattern in there also. So in your reining pattern, you've got to be smooth, but you have to be fast in the reining pattern to score the best. So your horse has to be able to slide and spin. What am I forgetting? Used to be you had to jump too. That was pretty fun. But I'm sure there's quite a few of us that don't mind that we don't have to jump anymore.
So showmanship.
Well, horsemanship, and I think we were talking about wanting to mention the horsemanship. To me, that's kind of close to a Western dressage pattern. The patterns themselves are not necessarily like dressage, but you have to be able to go in and very gracefully and be very accurate on your transitions, on your circles and straight lines, all the things we all work on and, sound so easy, but being very particular about them is not, as anybody that's tried it, we all know it's not easy at all, especially when you're also trying to remember your pattern. And then of course there's showmanship as well, which might be my least favorite, because you get to remember a pattern and do all that while you yourself get to trot on the ground as well.
So I would suspect you're not going to do all that in 1 year, right? If you're just getting started with versatility, it's not about trying to accomplish that in 1 year, or just taking little pieces and building.
Yes, absolutely. Because part of it also, especially if you have a horse that you have not competed on a lot, or maybe you've mostly competed in rail classes where there's more than one horse in the arena, it takes a bit of time just to get your horse comfortable going into the arena by themselves, which, several of those classes that I mentioned are individual pattern classes. So there's just a lot of development that takes place to get your horse confident enough, and the connection between you and your horse. Well, and sometimes it's us that gets just as nervous as the horse going in by ourselves. So yeah, that is something you just, I would recommend picking a few classes, and then don't ever be afraid to try some new classes, because there isn't any of us that are going to go in and have a perfect ride anyway. And everybody is very supportive back in the versatility arena. You hear everybody chipping in, trying to help each other out. So as long as you're not pushing yourself too much to where it's, the whole idea is for it to be fun. We all know there's some pressure involved anytime you're competing or going a little bit out of your comfort zone, but don't push it to the point where you're just mentally totally exhausted, but go ahead and experiment a little bit. Part of it is honestly a physical endurance back there. it doesn't sound like doing 3 or 4 classes in one day is necessarily that much, but it's a lot. It's a lot for the horses and the riders.
So before we jump over the cattle class, we did have a specific question about horsemanship. And someone was asking for some tips on how to do a really good horsemanship pattern, or things that would be good to practice at home to do a good horsemanship pattern.
Okay, well, one of the first things that comes to my mind is you need to do 1,000,000 transitions, because what really makes or break you in the horsemanship patterns is that your transitions happen right at the cone. And that just takes a lot of practice, so that you and your horse, for example, some horses I'm riding, I know that when I sit down to ask them, let's say, to go from a canter to a halt, or we'll just say canter to a halt. I know that when I sit down, it's probably going to be another stride or two before they're actually stopped, because I've done so many transitions on that horse. I just kind of know where they're at. And that's what you need to know, so that in that class, I know to sit down and start asking 2 strides before I get to the cone, so that I can stop right on the dot next to that cone. So that would be number 1. Tons and tons of transitions, so you and your horse are totally connected. The next thing basically is making sure your straight lines are good in your circles. It doesn't get much more basic than that, but those things have to be excellent. And of course, a lot of that goes back to us and learning how to really focus on where you're going. Probably one of the biggest pitfalls is we tend to all want to look at our horse, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is very hard to not look down at your horse. And the second you do that, your accuracy and the correctness of your pattern goes downhill quick. But on the flip side of that, when you do remember to keep your eyes up and look at the path you want your horse to follow, the improvement is instant as well.
Those are great.
Throw in a big thing at our place. We start teaching first few rides. We're already asking for it, is for our horses to stop from a relaxed seat and an exhale. And like we're going to make sure that's in all our horses, but it's not hard. It's like, it's just not, particularly if you're not overriding, your horse. Like, I got to be careful on horses that we train for other people, because they'll take in a big breath, and our horse is dropping it into the ground. Once they learn, if there's going to be a rest period behind that exhale, they'll start looking for it, particularly when they're more relaxed. You may not get that right off the bat. But in like what Jenny was talking about, your pattern and your transitions at the cone, way back when we were riding for Lynn and Whalen, we had a really nice JJ mare to ride, and she actually placed second in the open division against the quarter horses that year in the
The NVRHA.
Yeah, National Versatility Rancho Association. So that's where we met Jay and Gene, and that's where we really got into it. But one of my favorite things to do in the pattern class is when you would go from a hand gallop or a canter to a walk. And of course, she had the stop from an exhale, like down pat. So I could come flying in and just sit down and exhale, never even pick up on my reins. And she would skid on 2 back feet, and then I'd just bring my life back up and she'd walk. So, those little things that you're working on, from day one, they're like super handy later on,
Well, Tony, that's a good transition for us to talk about cows for a little bit. Because probably no one's better handy with the cattle classes than you are. You're amazing to watch. So let's talk a little bit about gaited horses and cattle. And I saw you do a clinic once where you talked about preparing your horse to do cattle classes without cows. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that.
Can I interrupt just one more
Yes.
time? And then I promise we can talk about cows. One thing I just wanted to add for the horsemanship question, as far as preparing, you have to have targets in your arena. You have to have markers to mark at first, even your circles or where you're going to do transitions. You can't just do them when you're practicing, because then you won't notice when you miss your spots. So for somebody preparing, I don't care if it's a bucket, a cone, a lead rope over the fence, but have some markers in your arena that you can use so that you get very precise on your transitions. Okay, I'm all done.
Okay. Let's talk about cows, Tony. I know you're
Cows.
waiting.
Well, the cow classes, but if a lot of people get afraid, like they're afraid to work cattle, and probably they should be, but it's not because why they think they should be. Most people just lose their mind out there. They just,
Tony, you're not supposed to say that.
well, it just happens, you know. And you know, the public arena is a great place to you know, be humbled. But the cow classes, well, I know for us, because nobody ever really gets the time that they want on their cow horse. You know, we've had a couple of fox trotters. We've had a few horses that'll sure enough go one-handed. I mean, you drive your cow, drop your hand, they will hold their cow. But like like you're kind of getting into nearly being able to go show in a real cutting class there. And like who, if you're training for ranch horse versatility, you know, you don't usually have that kind of time. And
Or access to cattle
access to
enough.
cattle enough, right.
But we will talk about how you can do some of that without the cattle.
So where most people get in trouble in the cow classes are they're not thinking correct turns and straight lines, and they're not thinking about making sure that they give their horse enough room to hold their cow. And I don't know, is this where we were going? What question did you
Well,
ask?
part
How
of-
did I get on this subject anyway?
Well, why people get scared, or why we need to talk about why they shouldn't be scared to try it, and then how you can start preparing your horse when you don't have cattle, because most of us, we don't even have cattle right now. In fact, we've had to prepare horses for the show with no cattle. They didn't see cattle until we came to the show. It's
So
not
I
the
was
way we
amazed
prefer to
when
do
I
it.
heard you guys say that before, because the horse that you were telling that story on, when you got there, I would have thought it had been around lots of cows. And I think that's because I think that does limit a lot of people from giving it a try, is that they don't have access to cattle.
We use our kids, we use the kids, we use ponies or other horses, and we use ourselves.
And all that ties back into the amount of play drive that your horse has. If your horse wants to play, well, if you've done a good job of not knocking that out of your horse before you get to it, because you know, if you're going to play a game, like, you have to be engaged, right? You have to be thinking. So if you want your horse to play with you with a flag or whatever you want to put out in front of them, you have to remember that just because you're having fun doesn't mean your horse is having fun. You know, it's like you can do a little bit of it, but if you do too much, and then your horse they'll check out on you, and then like you got nothing. But if you maintain that philosophy, well, now you can put a stick on a bag, and you can teach your horse to follow the bag.
And basically what you have to show the horse, and some of this is a little bit hard just to explain, it's almost easier to demonstrate, but we talk a lot about finding the sweet spot. Where's the sweet spot? Where's the good spot? Which normally for a horse, what is a sweet spot? Well, a lot of times it's a spot where they don't have to do anything. You know, they kind of hurry up and do something so they can sit there and rest a minute. You know, sometimes we'll make it even sweeter, and they'll find a treat when they get there or something, you know, depending on what that horse needs to motivate them. But so our whole philosophy is, you know, kind of hurry up so you get someplace where you can rest. And so that's how we'll use the flag. If they get behind, they have to go a little faster, but as soon as they stay up even with the flag or stop with the flag, then they get a break. And they've found it to the sweet spot.
Well, and that's a pretty important philosophy, and we learned that by playing with cows. Your horse can never get in trouble for not being where he's supposed to be. He just has to hurry back to the place where he should have been, and then he has to find relief when he gets there. Because once again, if there's too much stimulation, your horse, they can't problem solve if there's too much going on. So, we try to keep things real simple. And, we're talking about stopping your horse from your seat, teaching your horse that that's a good thing to do. Well, we throw in still targets also. So like our cow horses, before we ever do much with them on cattle, we will have a barrel, a cone. We might have our mechanical cow set up with the flag, in different positions, and we'll be able to haul it across the pen, loose rein. Now there's a process to get there. That's not the way you start, but what we're happy with is when we can just focus on our target, squeeze, and if we hold our squeeze, they should continue to accelerate. And then when we get to the target, we just sit down and drop our hand. And when they find the target and park it, and they don't have happy feet afterwards, like now you're ready to start going after some moving targets.
Yeah, so we start with with targets that aren't moving, and then we'll switch to targets that are moving. And of course, our focus is one of the key, it's a key piece there. We have to be looking at the target.
Well, and you have to be perfectly comfortable allowing your horse to miss the target, because once again, once you've kind of shown them like this is where you need to be, this is where the sweet spot's at, then you go ahead and just let them miss it. Oh dang, you should have been back there. Hustle up, get back there. Now we're going to sit. And people have a really hard time allowing their horse to make as many mistakes as they need to make until they get the concept, because it's just hard for people to do that. They want to rein them, they want to pull them, and I was there, a few years ago, like I know where they're at. But I just know that if you're going to play with cows, like you got to ride in there knowing what your horse can do, and he better be able to do a little bit.
So there's several different types of ranch horse classes. So where would you suggest people start?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, I don't think when you're talking about the cow classes, in ranch horse, like you need a gas pedal that works both ways. When you push on it, they accelerate. When you let off, they slow down. And so if you have a few basic horsemanship skills in place, well, then the cow class, like, it really doesn't make any difference. I mean, the working cow horse is a little bit faster than the ranch cow.
But any of those classes, how fast you go. I mean, granted, some of it depends on the cow. You're not totally in control every time you walk in the pen. There's a little bit of it's the luck of the draw. But as a general rule, the closer you are to the cow, the faster they're going to go. So if I'm riding a horse and I don't want things to be quite so fast and wild, I just stay a little further away from the cow. So even in the working cow horse, assuming that you have a reasonable cow and you're not that will yield and move when the horse gets in their way, you can play with those cows further away from them and not have to go as fast and not be as challenging, right, for you and your horse. And the same thing goes in the cutting. I mean, obviously your horse has to be comfortable in the ranch cutting. You've got to be able to walk in among all the cows in the herd and be able to drive one out. But regardless of what class you're in, there's basically three main elements. You're either going to be driving and pushing the cow somewhere, or you're going to be holding them, trying to block them from going back another direction. And why did I just forget what the third one was? Driving, holding, and I don't know. It's late here in Florida.
Yeah, the main thing is your horse has got to have some handle on him, and it has to be smooth handle. Not let's try to put a better neck rein on our horses, 2 weeks before we go to the horse.
That's not the class.
go do our rail classes and trail ride all summer, and then, oh, I might want to do the cow classes. Let's hurry up and put a spin on it.
Now you
Because that
can,
doesn't work.
you can do all those things, but while you're out trail riding, do some little turnarounds now and then, add some little pieces in that are going to come back. I mean, your horse can only go 6 directions, right? And for the most part in the show arena, we really only need about 4 of those most of the
We
time.
generally don't need to up.
Well, unless you're going over an obstacle, but yeah, we
Well,
usually
I'm
don't need
thinking-
the
I'm
up, we
thinking
usually
higher.
don't need the down, but they need to be able to go forward, backwards, right and left with no argument, with no resistance, with no debate. That we need to be able to have. And then your horse needs to be comfortable around cows, but if they can go right, left, forward and back without arguing with you whenever you ask, and they're not scared to death of the cows, then it's just a
Well,
matter
like-
of the rider having an idea of what it is, what their job is, what it is they're trying to achieve when they go in the arena for each class.
There's like so many little nuances to all this. So like, yeah, it's a really good idea if your horse is comfortable with cattle, but maybe he's not 100% comfortable. Well, when you're riding into the herd, like just ease your horse in there. And if you feel a little bit of pushback, like start making some little adjustments. I mean, that comes down to what we call like approach and retreat. Like, so like I can feel things pushing on my horse. Well, maybe I'll just sidestep over here. I'll find a way to get to where I want to go without,
Pushing
getting
them.
stuck into that. We need to go there. We need to go there. Now, don't argue. Because, our horses, they don't care. They start worrying about something. They'll just, they don't care who else knows about it. They got no shame there.
So is roping typically the most challenging, mainly for the rider, I would assume? The rope.
If you've had a chance to track cattle a little bit and you've put that into your horse, yeah, then it becomes mostly a challenge for the rider,
Okay.
because not everybody will actually stick the rope on their cow, even though they're capable.
Oh, quit looking at me.
Some people, when they go out there, you think, wow, they were thinking about catching that cow. They just didn't quite get there. And then some people go out there and like, here they go. And then it's like, they'll just kind of flop it out there. They were serious until the last minute. So yes, absolutely. The roping is tougher on the rider than the horse. But, because all right, so you still have to dally, right?
Mhm.
Well, that can be pretty scary. And you get your finger caught in that gosh dang dally, even with a breakaway Hondu, and you feel like you just lost your finger. It hurts like
It takes
many
a little
days afterwards.
takes a little preparation.
Yeah.
A lot of part of which can be done on the ground without your horse.
Well, there's so many things you can do on the ground. Like, are you going to rope? Oh, well, then maybe you should be able to drag a log on a pattern. Oh, and how else is that going to help you? Well, guess what? You got to drag a tire and foxtrot across the pen.
Yeah, it's part of the
But
ranch horse.
once again, like, being able to dally off on an object and then draw a pattern on the ground with the object. Well, is your horse staying in between your legs and your reins? Is he soft enough and responsive enough that you can stop and move and halt and move all the different directions you want to go?
Is he comfortable with
and
the
it's
rope
slow,
touching him on
right,
both
and-
sides of his hip and on top, and all of which we start off with on the ground first, making sure our horse is confident with those things before we're up there.
Right.
So
And
Tony, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and we never tie anything to the horse, the saddle horn. We do not attach anything to the saddle horn. I'm just saying in preparation.
Yeah. Tony, so you mentioned why we should be nervous about these classes. So tell me why we should give them a try.
Well, because all right, so I'll just say it. If you will just do a few things that I tell you to do, it'll go quite well. That's that you don't have to be nervous. Like it's just like, it's not that hard. it's like, how much handle does your horse have? Can you lope and stop and have your horse just kind of get into the ground and get back 2 steps? Well, if you can do that and you can turn a 180, nice straight turn on the haunches, and then your horse can accelerate out of that smoothly. Well, you can do all kind of stuff when you can do that.
It sounds like a lot of the basics that you talked about on the versatility side, and even just that forming that initial handle on the horse too. So it sounds like it's sort of all can. So if your horse can do some of these basic things, really they could do any class you wanted to put them in.
Yep. Yeah. It all goes back to the foundation. Once again, if you have the basics, you know, and when I say the basics, you can't just, yeah, we can kind of do them. They need to be, you know, they need to be good. They need to be good. It doesn't mean you have to spend hours though. Like I said, you can work on that when you're going down the trail. Then there isn't a class out there that you can't go in and do.
The cow classes, being able to read a cow, like that's pretty big. Like you definitely have to have a handle on your horse, but you need to learn to read a cow. So that's not hard.
It's not that, it shouldn't be. If we think about it, it shouldn't be that difficult for us. If people are used to reading their horses when their horses are loose, and especially if there's more than one. You know, cows and horses are very similar in the way they react and the way they move. And, you know, with the cows, basically where that cow is looking is where they're going to go. So if you need them to go someplace else, you have to get them looking someplace else.
Now, a simple little rule of thumb, the cow needs to be between you and the place where you want him to go. If your cow is not there, don't push on it. And that sounds pretty simple, but in the heat of the moment, you know, like I said, it's easy, you know, I'm just as guilty as anybody. I haven't done it in recent years, but I used to, you know, I would get a little bit gung-ho, and there's times when you need to be a block, and there's a time when you need to drive, and there's a time when you need to put a little, you know, cow side arc on him and take a little pressure off. And
so much of it with the cows, and where people a lot of times get into trouble, is we just get caught up and we end up chasing them. You know, we have good intentions, we're not going to chase them, but you end up trying to outrun them or chase them, and that just very seldom works. It's all about just changing your angle, and like Tony said, if you want to put it in its simplest terms, you just have to keep the cow between you and wherever you want him to go. And so that is more about sometimes backing off and changing your line and going across. Very seldom does it have to do with pushing or going faster.
Well, you get your score starts taking a hit when you lose working advantage of the cow. And so if your cow goes right, but he's going a little bit fast, when you go right, instead of going straight, you just take a little line off, take pressure
You
off
have to
your
go
cow.
further right.
Yeah, and just
Further
get off.
right.
And the judge never really, he doesn't see that you've lost it. You know, your horse can't, he's not a bona fide cutting horse. He'll get across there, get a stop, block the cow. You know that. So you just take a little line, get over here. Everything's very smooth. You held your cow, he didn't get back, no back fence. To anybody that's watching, it was very smooth, and you made your horse look good. You helped him out because you know he wasn't prepared for that. Whereas, like Jenny was saying, you know, people get in the heat of the moment. So you got a cow going across the pen, and you make the turn, and all of a sudden the cow goes faster, and you go faster, and then it's like, oh, there is, and people just keep going. Right. It's like it's done. It's a done deal.
So it's kind of learning to be patient a little bit with it versus trying to hurry through it.
Yep, be patient, and you just have to look at it differently. You have to think in straight lines, basically, and angles. And it's just a different way of looking at it than I think any of us ever, you know, that's not what you think you're going to be doing when you go out to go in a cutting class or, you know, a working cow horse class. You're not thinking about lines and angles, but that is the key.
So we just have a few minutes left, and I hate to put you guys on the spot for this, but I know you have some clinics coming up. And so I don't know if you remember when they when they are. Like I said, I did not ask you for this, but
Might kind of.
I think you have a cattle clinic coming up soon, don't you?
Yeah, we
we
actually have
do.
one the
Yeah.
third weekend of this month. So it's the 24th through the 26th, I believe, if that's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday anyway.
Okay, and that's, I think, around here in Kansas City.
It
Yeah.
is. It's in Lone Jacket, Sitter Downs.
Okay, perfect. And then you guys do lessons there at your place in Florida, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So if people are out there watching and they need help and they're in Florida, or they just want a vacation to
Maybe
Florida,
they just want, some nicer winter weather.
Yeah.
I
yes,
guess it's spring now almost.
give Jenny and Tony a call and go down there and take some lessons and practice. I can attest that they're very informative, and very good with horses. So kind of going down there and doing that, or attending one of your clinics. You normally have several different clinics throughout the year. So is there a good place for them to find those dates through you guys, or just normally, I know up here you do a lot through Sitter Downs, but I think you do in some other places as well.
Yeah, because we'll be at Von Holton Ranch in April also. But yeah, actually our For the Horse Ranch Facebook page is probably one of the,
Well, technically it's a group.
I'm sorry, it's a group, not a page. We always list our dates on there.
Okay.
That's probably one of the best places, but yeah.
Well, and I thought it'd be really fun. I haven't really discussed it with anybody, but a couple of years ago, we did a versatility cow clinic, like a couple of weeks before the Ava show in the fall. And I thought it'd be fun to do that again. So I think we're going to for sure be putting that.
Try, yeah, it's kind of figure out
See-
if there's some place where we can do that and try to work that out.
Oh yeah, that would be great. And then Tony, are you still doing with Caitlin? Are you still doing your barrel futurity? Do you still do
Yeah,
those?
yeah, we got our babies going. We futurity age is 5 and under. So our babies are 4 this year. And so there was no real push to get them ready as 4-year-olds. But yeah, that was that's a pretty fun project.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I suggest people try to find those because they're fun little videos that occasionally pop up on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
Of the competition between the two of you on getting those horses ready. So I've actually learned a lot. I don't do barrel racing, but I think there's a lot you can take from that on other horses as well.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
all, at this
Yeah.
point, everything they're doing is pretty much still all foundation and target training. So yeah.
Well, speed control comes in little pieces at a time. So like whether you're doing ranch horse or versatility, like you always need speed control. And you want a horse that's really sound in mind. Like I'm so committed to my horses being rock solid on their job. We've had the little target training exercise that we talked about. When if you translate that to the barrel pen, it's like the first trip you ever haul your green barrel horse to. They're not missing a barrel now. I don't care what's going on or who's in the stance. In their world, that barrel is the absolute best and only place to be, and they will find it. They might come in the pen, head up in the air, looking around, and as soon as they feel you, bear down and focus, it's like barrel.
Yeah.
And so it's the same way with the cattle. And if you teach your horse, the main thing is that you don't take the fun out of it for your horse, and you make sure that your horse, you got to make sure your horse feels like he's appreciated. Horses just really like that. They like to know that they're appreciated. They don't need you to gush over them all the time, but when they make progress and they feel a nice rub on the neck, it means something to them.
Yeah. That's a good place for us to end today. I will share, for those of you who are watching on our Regional Fox Riding Horse Foundation page, we'll share your For the Horse Ranch group so people can find that. And I'd also encourage people to go, and I don't remember the name of the group where you guys post your barrel horsing. I'll try to find it too and
Oh,
share.
it's maturity eligible.
But we
Okay.
do post, usually I think he posts on the For the Horse Ranch group also.
Does he? Okay, perfect. So I'll make sure that people, because it is kind of fun to watch father and daughter compete. I will say it's entertaining to me to watch some of those videos. So we'll make sure to share that. And again, if anyone out there is looking to start in versatility or ranch horse, no better people to reach out to than Tony and Jenny. They're so gracious with their time. And so I encourage people to do that, reach out to them with any of their training needs. If you have a horse that needs to be trained or started or whatever you need to be, reach out to them